I'm back explaining music theory stuff, and I promise you next video we will be entirely using, oh no! Next video we will be completely using the piano, no reference to these stupid little colorful blocks. But today we are referencing the stupid little colorful blocks as I explain some basic chord progressions. Now, last couple of videos I've been talking about the Roman numerals using, which are like why we use like the scale degrees and stuff. It's like what keeps on happening is like this is one of the original videos I wanted to create, but I realized to explain this video I had to explain other concepts, and that's just made more stuff. So I'm finally getting something I actually want to talk I've been wanting to talk about, which is chord progressions. Because there are lots of wonderful, wonderful chord progressions in this world. A chord progression is just the progression of chords. It is the sequence of chords you play. There are chord progressions a lot of songs use, and like common chord progressions that you might hear, like a 12-bar blues, or your ice cream chords, or whatever they're called, ice cream parlor, bubble gum, whatever the crap chords, you know? Chord progressions aren't necessarily set. You could play a friggin' like, A minor half diminished, and then a C, and then a G. That's not like a necessarily like established chord progression, but and there's not really a name for that, but that's still your chord progression. That still counts as a chord progression. Today I'm gonna cover some you may have heard about before or may hear in music. So maybe after this video, you might be able to identify it, which is super cool. We're gonna start with the basic chord progression number 1. This is called like the 4-chord progression, I think. If vanilla, and I mean not even vanilla bean, but just vanilla was a chord progression, this is it, okay? So this is your 4th chord, this is called basic chord progression number 1, as I call it. And it is what you hear in so many different songs. My favorite example of this is Let It Be by the Beatles, because that is such a pretty song. The thing about chord progressions is you say them in terms of Roman numerals. So it can be applied to whatever key you're playing and whatever scale you're playing. So if I was like, and like here, so I, capital Y, doesn't necessarily apply to C. Capital Y could apply to G flat, for example, and that's the major first note of your key, your scale, your song, okay? But the basic pop chord progression number 1 goes like this. Let me write this down for the people in the back. We're adding a new feature to the signs. Okay. This is our, piggy. This is our basic pop chord progression number 1. You go I, V, little number 6, and then big O number 4, okay? This is your basic chord progression. You play your root, then you go up to your 5th, then you go up to your minor 6th, and then you go back to your 4th. This chord progression, this basic pop chord progression is mostly played in major. So this is featured in song, often starting on the C. These 4 notes and these 4 chords in this order is very common. I believe this is what they play in Let It Be by the Beatles. This order of notes is played in so many different songs, like switching up the variation, even just like C, G, A minor, and F. Those 4 notes form like the basis, the basic harmony of so many different songs. It's insane and boring how many times this is used. It's crazy. But yeah, so this is your basic pop standard chord progression, vanilla, bleh. Be gone with it. Like, this is so dull. I'm sorry. It's good if you're like writing music for the first time and you're trying to figure out a chord progression which sounds good, and you're just like, okay, let's try this. But this is boring. This is so boring. Okay? So let's move on to something more interesting. Now this is where this comes into more of my kind of line of thinking. This is another chord progression which is in some way overused, but it's slightly more interesting. This is your 12-bar blues. Can you guess why it's called the 12 bar blues. That's right. Well, I don't know what you said, but it has 12 bars. So imagine each of these is a bar. The thing about the 12 bar blues is it isn't necessarily 12 bars. It's more 12 bars in the sense of a ratio, which will make sense. So you can play this in 24 bars. You could technically play this in 6 bars. You could, mate, are you kidding me? For like the term simplistic ratio kind of terms, we're going to talk in 12. So 12 bar blues. We've got 12 bars. Imagine each sign is a different bar. We're going to go over here. This is I. And we're going to play our first, our root, our tonic, whatever you want to call it. We're going to play our first chord for 4 bars. I. Yeah? So in terms of if you're talking in C major, we're going to play C major chord, C major chord, C major chord, C major chord. Thrilling. Yeah? Then, ooh, a little bit of change. Are you expecting another C major chord? You'd be mistaken. We're actually going up to the 4th, which in this case is the major chord, but oh well, which is our F in this case. And then we are on the 4th for 2 bars, and then we're back down to our fruit. We're turning home. We're getting back home, you know? And then in our 9th bar of the 12 bar blue ratio, we're going to play 1 bar of our 5th, our G, in terms of C major. 1 bar of our 4th in terms of C major is an F. And then we're back home for a little bit. You know, we're just chilling. This is your basic 12 bar blues, okay? This ratio is used a lot in both rock music and in basis jazz and blues music. It's called the 12 bar blues because it was mainly used in blues music. Blues scene mainly in America or with African Americans. It was then taken by the likes of Elvis Presley, 1950s, and popularized in rock and roll music, which uses a lot of 12 bar blues. But it originates in blues music, and you can feel it a lot in jazz as well, because jazz is kind of, I would say, the happier version of blues. You can't have jazz without the blues. You kind of have to appreciate both. But I play a lot of jazz music, so I see this a lot. I love seeing this because I'm just like, yep, I know exactly what I'm going to play in the bass. I know the shape. I know what I can do for an easy walking bass line. Love it. You can identify this quite easily as well. So for anyone who doesn't know about jazz music, often you will be given like a piece of music and you have like 5 minutes or maybe even less to kind of look over and figure out what you're going to do. Easy ways to identify a 12-bar blues. It will start and end same chord-ish on the same chord. There'll be 12 bars or some sort of factor or multiple of 12. So like 6, 12, 24, etc. It will go to a 4th at some point during the song and then return back to the root. Now, this, I've played a lot of different types of blues. Sometimes they're a bit iffy. Like sometimes here, instead of playing a 5th, they'll play a slightly different chord. But it has the same kind of vibe. I've never played a 12-bar blues where they don't go up to the 4th. I believe this kind of jump from the root to the 4th on the 5th bar, or the equivalent 5th bar, that's an essential part of the 12-bar blues. That's a really easy identifier. And then returning home. Often this, like the final 4 bars or 4 equivalent bars, depending on if you're doubling it, halving it, whatever. These are often subject to change, and they're kind of changed dependent on what kind of song you're playing. Yeah. But I really like this chord progression. That is what a chord progression is, and I hope you understand what a chord progression is. It's just a sequence of chords, and you've learned about 2 chord progressions. One that you can use if you really want to, and one that's pretty awesome, and I love when I see. But there's lots of interesting chord progressions online. It's very easy to make your own and kind of figure out what you like and what you sound like without having outside influence of what other people have done. But if you're like new to making music, or you just want to have an easier time,
it is completely fine to search up chord progression and then just apply it to whatever chord you're doing. I do that sometimes, like as someone who doesn't play a chord or a chord instrument and has a bit of a hard time distinguishing what sounds good. Sometimes I do this. I do Google random chord progression on Pinterest or whatever, and there's some pretty cool stuff out there, but I do implore you to play some more interesting stuff than whatever the basic chord progression or whatever. But anyway, thank you so much for listening, and I hope you've learned something, because I certainly have. Good night.